I'm Nicole Lappin, the only financial expert you don't need a dictionary to understand. It's time for some Money Rehab.
Hi, this is Mosh Oinounou, the Mo from Mo News. If you're familiar with us on Instagram or our podcast, I'm a longtime TV news producer who launched an independent news brand just a few years ago. As you know, Nicole is on maternity leave. So this week, my co-host Jill and I are guest hosting Money Rehab. Each day, we're going to be sharing the latest episode of Mo News right here on the Money Rehab feed. So you guys get the news you need to know every day this week. Here's today's episode. Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. I'm Mosh Oinounou.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And Jill, in your household, celebrations continue over the big national championship win in college football.
That's right. Ohio State, the national champions, as we reported on Tuesday, and my husband soaking it all in and enjoying it.
Yeah, much productivity in the household in the past 24 hours? Or
Zero.
No, just pure celebrations. It's the first win in like a decade for the Buckeyes, right?
Yeah, and it comes after the big loss to Michigan in the regular season. So the lesson, I guess, to take away from it is never give up, because who would have thought that the Ohio State Buckeyes would wind up winning it all?
Yeah, it's a cool setup now in college football, a 12-team playoff. So it gives an opportunity to teams that wouldn't typically have gotten a chance to play in the national championship game. Specifically this year, Notre Dame and Ohio State, they both made their runs, and then Ohio State's just lasted a bit longer. So congrats to all the Buckeye fans, including a couple on our team here at Mo News. And good luck to the Fighting Irish, who they haven't won a championship, Jill, since the 80s. They'll get it one day.
All right, Motion, I think you and I need to start getting used to a different news cycle because we're busy.
Jill, I will note, I was talking to friends in the White House press corps. In the first 48 hours of it's not even been 48 hours as we record this, in the first 36 hours of the Trump presidency, they believe he has now taken more questions from the media than Biden did in a year. And so just a remarkable amount of news coming out of Washington right now.
Right. Whatever your thoughts are on Donald Trump, he's accessible.
He's accessible. He's talking about everything. But of course, there are people who vehemently disagree with some of the things that he's doing. Nonetheless, he is talking and explaining why he's doing what he's doing. And so we'll try to get to some of the headlines made in the last 24 hours here on this podcast.
All right, and let's get to those headlines, starting with politics and the first full day of the second Trump term, his plans to crack down on illegal immigration, specifically in Chicago, and pushback on his order to end birthright citizenship. 22 states have already filed suit. Also, some pushback on Trump's sweeping pardons of everyone charged in the January 6th storming of the Capitol. In other Trump news, a massive investment in AI, and his first cabinet pick, Marco Rubio, for Secretary of State, now confirmed. To the weather, where there's historic snow in Florida, Louisiana, and Texas. Mosh, it's being called a once-in-a-generation storm.
Jill, we had to look twice outside Cafe Du Monde in New Orleans. What you thought were streets full of powdered sugar, totally understandable, actual snow there down in NOLA.
In a prisoner swap, the Taliban has released 2 American citizens. And in much lighter news, chicken noodle soup, but make it a sucking candy. We'll explain.
We haven't gotten a chance to try these, we will admit.
And Mosh has on this day in history.
Jill will tell you about the most famous Super Bowl commercial of all time here as we near this year's Super Bowl.
Okay, starting with all the news related to illegal immigration. Trump's incoming border czar, Tom Homan, has been telling Chicagoans that the largest deportation operation in history was set to start on Tuesday. However, as of Tuesday night, it was uncertain whether the Chicago raids will actually begin as planned, given the extremely cold temperatures and leaks about the operation. Areas in Chicago with big Latino populations were pretty empty during most of the day Tuesday. Federal authorities are planning to go after several hundred people in this country illegally with criminal records.
Jill, there is talk that all the leaks about the deportations beginning might have made things more challenging for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So it appears while they had planned to begin in Chicago there, the heads up didn't make life easy for federal authorities. So they're reconsidering right now how they're going to do this. to ensure that all the places they plan on going don't leak out in the media in advance.
It comes as Trump signed a number of executive orders related to the issue in just his first 24 hours in office. That includes him calling for the State Department to start the process of designating certain cartels as global terrorists and foreign terrorist organizations. So the reason for this is because it would give his administration more power to impose economic penalties, travel restrictions, and potentially even take military action inside of foreign nations. In the executive order he issued on Monday, Trump named 2 gangs in particular that operate inside of the United States, the Venezuelan Tren de Aragua and the El Salvadoran MS-13, which is very active here on Long Island. Using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the government could take additional steps to disrupt the financial networks of the gangs. Trump was asked about whether this means the U.S. military will move inside of Mexico and other countries. Take a listen to this exchange from inside of the Oval Office as journalists asked him questions on Monday night.
Cartels are now going to be seen as foreign terror organizations. Would you think about ordering U.S. Special Forces into Mexico to take them out?
Could happen. Stranger things have happened.
So it's interesting here, Jill, naming the drug cartels as terror groups and what that opens up to the U.S. military here, what it means to U.S.-Mexico relations, and other side of this, asylum seekers. You can now make a claim in the U.S. that you live in an area controlled by a terrorist group and make a claim that you should have a right to seek asylum here in the U.S. So there have been some people internally within the Trump administration who were pushing back on the idea of making drug cartels terror groups, especially with asylum seekers in mind, that there's a downside here to naming the drug cartels as terror groups. Nonetheless, significant move here, putting an MS-13 and other cartels at the rank of an Al-Qaeda or Hamas or ISIS or any other terror group around the world here. It comes as there was just a slew of Trump executive orders in the past day here, including some that involve U.S. procedures here in the country. You mentioned the potential deportation raids in Chicago. Well, there are now new directives from the Trump administration on where raids can happen. For years now, going back to the Obama years, federal immigration authorities had policies they would not do raids in areas like churches and schools, well, what they call sensitive areas. Well, according to Trump, criminals will no longer be able to hide in America's schools and churches to avoid arrest. The idea before was they didn't want to stoke fear in immigrant communities that would keep children from going to school, stop people from going to hospitals. Nonetheless, it appears those directives have changed.
One of the immigration moves getting the most attention and now the most lawsuits. Monday, President Trump signed an executive order aiming to end birthright citizenship. Now, a group of 18 Democratic state attorneys general joined the legal fight to block the move, describing it as unconstitutional. Democratic state attorneys general from New Jersey to California signed on to the lawsuit filed Tuesday in Massachusetts. The city of San Francisco and Washington, D.C. are also suing. The case could end up becoming the first major Supreme Court showdown for Trump's second term agenda. In short, Trump is trying to end the fact that any baby born in America is automatically a citizen. The 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868 after the Civil War, says that all persons, quote, born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are automatically citizens. So this language was crafted and added to the Constitution to establish full citizenship rights for Black Americans. But since then, it has been interpreted for more than a century by courts as also granting rights to all children born on U.S. soil, and this is regardless of their parents' immigration status. In his executive order, however, Trump interpreted the amendment's language as excluding babies born in the United States to parents who are unlawfully present or who have lawful but temporary status. Trump called birthright citizenship ridiculous, claiming that we are the only country that does it. However, dozens of other nations, including Canada, Brazil, and Mexico, also have forms of birthright citizenship that are comparable to the United States. On Monday, there was a second legal action against this. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit aimed at blocking Trump's order. The executive director there saying denying citizenship to U.S.-born children is not only unconstitutional, it is also a reckless and ruthless repudiation of American values.
This is an Trump administration. Even conservative legal scholars, even those who are sympathetic to Trump, who agree with him overall on the issue, know that this is an uphill fight in the courts. Trump is effectively trying to overturn a constitutional amendment, the 14th Amendment, with a simple executive order. I was watching an appearance by the former Trump Attorney General Bill Barr from his first term over on Fox News, who was like, listen, the executive order sounds great, but doesn't have that much authority. You do need at least Congress to pass a law here, but you potentially need a constitutional amendment, given how many cases the courts have faced related to the 14th Amendment over the course of more than a century here, years of precedent, that if you were born here, regardless of your parents' legal status, you are an American. And so that is the interpretation of the 14th Amendment, and you can't just sign an order. Otherwise, you do need Congress to get involved, or even, again, further, an amendment to the Constitution that revises the 14th Amendment. However, at the same time, the Trump order here gets the ball rolling on a national conversation, this is one of his goals, about birthright citizenship that could lead to an eventual constitutional amendment here. Now, amending the Constitution, we've only done it a few times in American history. It's incredibly challenging. You need a majority of states to sign on. You need Congress to go through it. That's an option. And so this will be difficult. And Trump sort of acknowledged it in the Oval Office as he was asked about it, as he was going through all of his executive orders. And he had media in the room. And they're like, well, what about this one? What about this one? He's like, we'll see about this one. You know, one of the many things he signed related to immigration. Jill, before we leave the issue, a remarkable moment yesterday in Washington as part of inauguration festivities. There's a prayer breakfast at the National Cathedral. Trump and Vance and their families, among a number of officials, were there on Tuesday. And that's where there were a number of religious officials who spoke, including a bishop. This is the Right Reverend Marian Edgar Buddy. And she made a point with the president in the room of speaking directly to him, speaking critically of him. We should note that Buddy has been critical of Trump in the past. And so she's a bishop there. And she took the opportunity to say it's incumbent upon us to speak the truth. And I want you, Mr. President, to show mercy to Americans who are scared right now. Those include LGBTQ Americans. She included illegal immigrants in there. Here, take a listen to a bit of what she had to say.
There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation. But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away.
Jill, pretty remarkable that this bishop was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it here in the ceremony. A lot of people, if you read the comments, we posted the clip over on Instagram where you see the side-by-side of Trump staring at her in one camera while she speaks. People who are big advocates of hers being like, yeah, I'm so glad she spoke to him. Others who are like, she was completely out of line. That was not something she should have been doing at the prayer breakfast. She was very policy oriented here at a time where she had just been praying for the country. Trump, nonetheless, was asked about it afterwards and told the media as he was walking on White House grounds, he didn't like the service. They need to do better over there at the church.
Yeah, they thought this was the easy part, right? You just got to show up. You're not going to really have to deal with politics at all.
Well, yeah, he's at a prayer breakfast. He thought it was just like being, like, we're going to pray for the country, we're going to pray for the president, etc. And the bishop here was like, no, I have thoughts for you. And I want to talk to you about how some people are feeling about your presidency. Trump, not one to enjoy, being effectively lectured from the pulpit.
Okay, now let's talk about presidential pardons. Both President Trump and President Biden coming under fire for broadly using their unique power to make comprehensive pardons. So we reported on this yesterday, but we want to talk about some of the reaction here. On Monday, then President Biden preemptively pardoned people that he thought would be targeted by the incoming Justice Department, including 5 of his family members. The concern, even from some Democrats, is that this was a massive overreach and sends a very bad precedent for future presidents going forward.
Jill, media was running around Capitol Hill yesterday trying to ask Democrats about it. And the repeated phrase from Chuck Schumer and others was, we're focused on the future. We're focused on the future. We're focused on the future. They did not want to talk about it.
Hours later, President Trump entered the Oval Office and pardoned approximately 1,500 individuals convicted for their involvement in the January 6th, 2021 U.S. Capitol attack. So he commuted the sentences of 14 others and directed the Justice Department to dismiss all pending cases related to January 6th. The bottom line, all January 6th defendants had their slate wiped clean by Trump. Trump said that he was going to pardon the January 6th rioters, so that wasn't a huge surprise. But it wasn't clear if he would pardon all of them. The thinking was that maybe he would pardon the ones that were charged with nonviolent crimes. But no, this was a blanket pardon for everyone charged with their actions that day, including those who committed violence. So looking here at who got pardoned, more than 100 were convicted of assaulting officers, including Patrick McCahey, who was found guilty during a bench trial of assaulting a Metropolitan Police officer with a dangerous weapon. Robert Scott Palmer, a Florida man who admitted to assaulting officers with a wooden plank and a fire extinguisher. Daniel Caldwell, he pleaded guilty to spraying officers who were guarding the Capitol with pepper spray. The two longest sentences were handed to former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio. He was sentenced to 22 years, and Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes, who was serving 18 years. Both are currently free. Tarrio was not actually in Washington on January 6th, but he was convicted of directing the attack remotely. Rhodes was convicted of seditious conspiracy for assembling $20,000 worth of assault weaponry that was intended to be used at the Capitol. Again, both of those men currently out of prison.
Pretty remarkable move here. Again, not a surprise. I think the surprise for a number of Republicans on Capitol Hill was they were hoping that some of these guys, literally there's video of them assaulting police officers, beating them up with their own shields. And the hope was that they would distinguish between all of them. But it appeared the priority at the Trump White House was all about just doing this as quickly as possible. And it would have taken a lot of time to go through the various cases, I guess. They didn't do it in advance of his presidency. So they decided to go with this blanket pardon, despite the fact that Trump, talks about, protect the blue, protecting police officers here. And so Trump was actually asked about this during one of his many media appearances in the first 36 hours here. Saying, hey, how does this jive with the fact that, you're all about defending police officers? And he's just like, these people have served their time. There's other people out there who do worse things who don't get prison time. Sort of made it a sort of a what about argument. But nonetheless, he's like, these people have served their time. I have no issue with this. This needed to happen. Nonetheless, media running around Capitol Hill yesterday talking to Republicans. A number of Republican senators disappointed in the lack of discernment here. Between those who were pardoned for nonviolent offenses and those who were pardoned for violent offenses, basically just wiping them all clean. Lisa Murkowski, Republican senator from Alaska, said, I was disappointed to see this. I do fear the message that is sent to these great men and women that stood by us. Speaking of police officers, you also had Bill Cassidy. He's a Republican senator from Louisiana. He said it's wrong to assault anybody, certainly a police officer. I'm a big back the blue guy. He was disappointed. Josh Hawley, Republican, big Trump guy from Missouri, said that if he were president, he would not have offered pardons to individuals who committed violence. But nonetheless, this was what Trump campaigned on. I could go on here. Tom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina. Susan Collins, Republican from Maine. All of them said, yeah, don't love this. But then they were quick to say, well, remember the Biden pardons of his family? Can we talk about that right now? Many of them just want to look forward here. But a major move among all the various moves Trump is making right now.
All right, time for the speed read from CNN. Historic snowfalls burying parts of the Gulf Coast amid dangerous cold as a once-in-a-generation winter storm wreaks havoc on travel in a region wholly unaccustomed to winter weather. On Tuesday, snow fell from southeast Texas through Louisiana and into parts of Mississippi and Alabama, creating treacherous conditions. An area stretching from Houston into southern Louisiana has already recorded widespread 1 to 3 inches of snow. A few areas topped 6 inches. A record amount of snow also hit New Orleans and other cities along the Gulf Coast. Mosh, incredible pictures of people cross-country skiing on Bourbon Street.
There were attempts for urban skiing along Bourbon Street, a priest and nuns snowball fight outside a church down there, snowboarding behind a golf cart, sledding down these snow-covered Mississippi River levees on kayaks, cardboard boxes, inflatable alligators. People enjoying themselves with snow in places where they never see this sort of thing. The first ever blizzard warning issued for parts of the Gulf Coast, including southeast Texas, southern Louisiana. Mid-city New Orleans recorded nearly 10 inches of snow as of this recording. Areas of Baton Rouge and New Orleans also got 5 inches of snow. You saw a blanket of snow in places like Houston with 20-degree weather. Schools and airports were closed. They're not equipped down there at Bush International like they would be at O'Hare, LaGuardia, or JFK. The governor of Georgia warning people to stay off the roads because of the onset of snow and ice. Again, it's the South. They're not really prepared for snow and ice. So everyone there, be careful as this thing melts.
From Fox Business, President Trump unveiled a massive artificial intelligence infrastructure project from the private sector on his first full day of his second term in office Tuesday. During a speech at the White House, he announced that SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle have joined forces for a project called Stargate to build data centers in the United States for powering AI. The CEO of all three tech firms, OpenAI's Sam Altman, Oracle's Larry Ellison, and SoftBank's Masa Son, joined Trump from the Roosevelt Room at the White House for the announcement. The initial investment for the project will be $100 billion, with plans to expand to $500 billion over the next 4 years. The first data center built under the initiative will be in Texas, and it will eventually expand to other states. Other investors are expected to join the venture, but it was not immediately clear which ones.
Yeah, so AI is our future, and it's going to require an incredible amount of power and an incredible amount of data infrastructure. And Trump is looking to own that in the future. We're in this race against China when it comes to all things AI. Trump has now secured $1 trillion in private investment for a variety of projects. That includes this project along with some other stuff. Altman, who I happened to see, but he was on the phone the whole time. I was at this party in D.C. over the weekend. Has been meeting with investors across D.C., really looking to get plugged in here as the new administration prioritizes AI. He had actually been looking at various places for data centers across the Middle East, as well as in Asia. American officials caught wind of that. They expressed concerns about a U.S. company like OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, that was trying to build vital technology in the Middle East. So it said, listen, you need to focus on doing this here in the United States. So Texas, first spot. We'll have more of these coming up here. But a huge priority as we continue here is going to be all things AI, including regulating it, right? How we're going to utilize it. But first, building that backbone for it.
So Mosh, my dad actually called me on Tuesday afternoon and he was like, are you watching this? You got to put on the TV. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And he was talking about the AI announcement because Larry Ellison, who's the Oracle CEO, he was going into all of the potential health benefits of the project. And he was talking about all of the diseases that would potentially be able to get cured through AI. He said, we'll be amazed at how quickly we're curing this cancer and that one and heart disease. He said little fragments of those cancer tumors float around in your blood, so you can do early cancer detection. And if you could do it using AI, you could do it with a blood test and have the AI look at the blood test, basically then gene sequence the cancer tumor and vaccinate the person. And so basically design a vaccine for every individual person, which would vaccinate them against the cancer. This is what Larry Ellison was trying to explain. And obviously we're still years away from that. But the potential here is really incredible.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about AI is it can do the power of many, 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 many humans. You give it various tasks to do analysis, and it's doing data analysis at a speed that we can't even comprehend. So when it comes to some of these very large tasks, and you mentioned there with cancer, the future with cancer and medicine writ large is customization, right? That we won't all just be in an ideal world in 20 years, not all be assigned the same medication when something happens. We'll be customizing it to your genes and your experience. And that level of customization will only be possible utilizing stuff like AI. So I don't want to digress here, but there's some very exciting things in the offing here. And part of what this is just, again, building the backbone for AI to be able to operate.
Yes, and it was not what I was expecting when my dad was like, turn on the TV. I thought I was going to see like a giraffe standing on its head. And instead
Warren Wagner, tracking the news. The Mo News team, we enlist the whole family here.
All right, from ABC News, the Senate unanimously confirmed Marco Rubio as Secretary of State with a decisive 99-0 vote, marking the first cabinet appointment in the president's administration. Rubio is the first Latino and the first Cuban American to hold the position. He is known for strong stances on China and his support for U.S.-India relations. His confirmation was praised across party lines, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer acknowledging Rubio's qualifications despite some policy disagreements.
See, that's the thing. The Senate has this advise and consent role, but as long as the person is qualified, you typically get most Democrats on board as well. You're going to have some very party line votes coming up here. Pete Hegseth is one of them. I'll mention that in a second. But ultimately, Rubio, he comes from the Senate. All the senators know him. Even with different issues, they understand that, he's the president's choice. They feel he's qualified. And so they have sent him off now to be the Secretary of State. You mentioned his Cuban American heritage. He's particularly a hardliner on Venezuela, Cuba, etc. So we'll see what comes of the policies there, specifically in Latin America. But he's got a tall order, right? We're talking about continuing the Gaza ceasefire deal, things related to Iran, various terror issues globally. What do we deal with Syria, the Ukraine-Russia crisis, managing China? The world is full of challenges right now. And Rubio has said that, the Secretary of State and the State Department will be central to that. We shall see how it plays out. Certain administrations give Secretaries of State more power. We saw that in the last administration. Some do less. And so we'll see how the relationship also works between Rubio and Trump, Rubio and other national security leaders, as well as some of the other cabinet appointments as they come aboard here. Now, they could vote on Pete Hegseth as soon as in the next couple days here, but there was some news yesterday. You might have seen this from NBC and the New York Times. An affidavit, a sworn statement, was submitted to senators on Tuesday, accusing Hegseth, this is the latest accusation against Hegseth, of apparently being so abusive towards his second wife. He's now on his third wife. His second wife, his ex-wife, that she once hid in a closet from him and had to use a safe word to call for help if she needed to get away from him. Now, this is a sworn affidavit from Danielle Hegseth, who happened to be the ex-wife of Hegseth's brother, describing what she said was erratic and aggressive behavior by Pete Hegseth towards, again, his second wife, Samantha. So this is the sister-in-law describing Hegseth's behavior towards an ex-wife here. The affidavit has been obtained by several media outlets, describes him drinking to excess and just abusive behavior. At the same time, the woman at the center of this, the ex-wife, the second ex-wife, Samantha Hegseth, apparently doesn't want to be a part of this. She's put out a statement saying, "There was no physical abuse in my marriage. This is the only statement I will make to you. I've let you know I am not speaking and I will not speak of my marriage to Pete. Please respect this." So she was very specific. She didn't deny everything in there. She just said, you have your information wrong. There was no physical abuse in my marriage. So that's where things stand. We'll see how much of an impact that has as he's been voted out of committee and now goes to a full Senate floor vote.
I am curious to see what the impact is, because it seemed like after he had his hearing in front of the committee, that potentially the hard part here was over. Joni Ernst backed him. She was seen as a major roadblock potentially. So we'll see if this does it, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, there's been a number of allegations against him. I mean, he was on the verge of being forced out, dropping out. They were talking, openly about having Ron DeSantis be the next nominee to be Secretary of Defense. Hegseth fought back, was able to recover his nomination here, but now a new allegation. So something we'll be tracking.
From CBS News, 2 Americans, Ryan Corbett and William Wallace McKenty, have been released by the Taliban in Afghanistan as part of a prisoner exchange for Khan Mohammed, who is imprisoned in the U.S. on drug trafficking and terrorism charges. The exchange was the result of extensive negotiations over 2 years and occurred just before President Biden's term ended and Donald Trump took office. Corbett had been detained by the Taliban since 2022 during a business trip to Afghanistan.
Some of his family and friends follow Mo News and sent us notes talking about their gratitude just on cloud nine here, that he's finally released here as part of this prisoner exchange, which again was mainly negotiated by the Biden team as they were leaving office here. Now, as far as who was traded in exchange for these Americans, the Justice Department referred to Khan Mohammed at the time they arrested him and were convicting him as a violent jihadist and narcotics trafficker who sought to kill U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan using rockets. He is the first person to be convicted in the U.S. on narco-terrorism laws. So apparently a really bad dude here, but nonetheless a negotiation. And this goes back, all the way back to Trump 1 when we were negotiating the exit deal from Afghanistan. Trump allowed the release of 1,500 Taliban prisoners as part of that deal to get U.S. troops out. So this is not the first deal we've made with them. They aren't presenting an overt threat right now to the U.S. They're sort of just managing their own situation in Afghanistan, though. Terrible treatment of women and other matters in Afghanistan. Nonetheless, this deal is done. But 2 Americans remain detained in Afghanistan right now. Their names are George Glesman and Mahmoud Habibi. And so we'll see if Trump will negotiate for their release.
Okay, and here's something that we could have used last week from USA Today. Progresso unveiled a new innovative way for soup lovers to satisfy their taste buds. And the response was overwhelmingly positive. So last Thursday, the soup company announced the launch of Soup Drops, a chicken noodle soup flavored hard candy drop that resembles a cough drop. The first batch sold out in under an hour. But Progresso posted on Instagram saying, don't worry, there's a fresh batch of soup you could suck on coming your way next Thursday. So that is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time at progressosoupdrop.com. Progresso saying there will be additional drops every week on Thursday for the rest of the month.
It feels like a Netflix situation. Like every Thursday, we're going to drop a new episode. We're going to drop some new soup drops. Very trendy there for Progresso. Apparently the drops taste, we haven't had a chance to try them, Jill. They taste like broth, savory veggies, soft egg noodles with a hint of parsley, according to the company. The drops are packaged in a can that look like a soup can, of course, naturally, with 20 individually wrapped candies in each can. The idea behind it, Progresso says, when you're sick, nothing is truly more reassuring than chicken noodle soup. So we thought, why stop at the soup bowl? Let's take our flavors and make them a fun, savory candy for a new way to enjoy the taste. Jill, I don't know how I feel about this. I'm open-minded, but you said we could have used it last week. Jill, we've been sick in this household. One of us has been sick since like mid-December. So we've got to use these for a while. We've gone through our share of both soup and cough drops, but no soup drops. So TBD.
I do feel that the whole point of soup when you're not feeling well is that it kind of like warms you up and loosens up anything you've got going on. But I get it. Either they'll flavor it like the menthol or maybe a citrus flavor. Why not just go for the soup?
Just double down on soup. All forms of soup in drop form, in soup form, in drink form. If anyone works related to Progresso here, we'll send us a message and we'll give you our address. Jill and I will try them live on the podcast.
Mosh, at this rate, one of us will be sick like next week.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need them. Send them over.
The ground dog hasn't even made its appearance yet. Like winter's going to be lasting a while. All right, now time for On This Day in History. In 1984, on this day, 41 years ago. Can that be right, Jill? Was 1984 41 years ago?
Not in my book.
No way. Jill says this was 20 years ago. On this day in 1984, Super Bowl 18 audiences see a commercial that is now widely agreed to be one of the most powerful and effective of all time. This was the commercial directed by Ridley Scott. It's Apple's 1984 spot featuring a young woman throwing a sledgehammer through a screen on which a big brother-like figure is preaching about the unification of thought. It heralded a new age for Apple, one of the most innovative ads of all time for Apple, the Apple 1984 spot. Check it out on YouTube. Still, I think, stands the test of time. A bit of politics legal news on this day in history. Roe v. Wade made history on this day in 1973. The Supreme Court issuing one of its momentous decisions, ruling in Roe v. Wade that a Texas statute criminalizing abortion actually violated a woman's constitutional right of privacy. That, of course, stood for nearly 50 years, the court overturning Roe v. Wade in 2022. One of the more iconic magazine covers of all time came out on this day in 1981. This was a month and a half after the shocking assassination of John Lennon, formerly of the Beatles. Rolling Stone magazine's John Lennon tribute issue hit the stands, featuring a naked Lennon curled up in a fetal embrace of Yoko Ono. It's an iconic Annie Leibovitz portrait. And we end here with a bit of music history on this day. 60 years ago, it's not unusual to be loved. Tom Jones, on this day, is 60 years ago. Also on this day, she's a rich girl.
Mosh, I think I have mentioned this on the podcast before, but there is a great cover of Rich Girl from Lake Street Dive. Highly recommend for anyone who likes that song.
It's not she's a rich girl. You're a rich girl, and you've gone too far.
Did I say she's a rich girl?
No, I said it. Because it don't matter anyway. Well, but the lyrics mattered as far as I was concerned. I wanted you guys to know that I will correct myself on Hall & Oates lyrics. Adele made some history on this day in 2012, more recently, breaking an American chart record that was held previously by the Beatles and Pink Floyd. This is when her album 21 went number one for 16 weeks.
Hello.
You're a rich girl. It's not unusual. Hello. Some iconic songs on this day.
And now we need Goodbye.
Yes.
Which doesn't have the same
You say
power.
hello, and I say goodbye. Hey, listen, we had Lennon in the
We did have the Beatles.
So.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It'll help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And review us in the App Store.
See everyone tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast.